Do, 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 do. Oh boy. So, I'm running a session, but I thought it was at 7. Well, I thought it was at 7 p.m. my time, and it actually turns out it's at 8 p.m. So I just decided, since I'm sitting at my computer anyways, and I have my camera open, I'm like, oh shit, I was ready to game, and I didn't. So I just, why not? I'll just go live. Although I don't think anybody's here, but nor should they be, because I literally just hit like the go live button. Oh boy. Now we got a couple people here coming in. Just a couple of us. It's not like I don't really have anything ready here. Hold on a second. Grab this chat. There we go. There's chat. What is up, everybody? It's interesting to see, who actually pays attention to random notifications. Good stuff. Oh, how is everybody's Saturday? Hopefully it's going well. Okay. Let's see. What's up, Ford? Nice to see you. Sims 3, awesome. Great to see you. Just a random chance. I was looking. Sims 3, I saw that I think EA is like officially re-releasing Sims 3 or something, or they're going to like support it again, I think. I read, or I didn't read. I was told by my roommate who loves The Sims. Yeah, okay, let's see what's up, Thunder. Good evening, Kyle. Good to see you. Yes, How to Kill an Hour. So, like I said, yeah, I if you didn't catch like the opening seconds of the stream, I was like sitting down like the last 15 minutes. I got my Arnold Palmer half and half iced tea, lemonade, and I was gonna sit down. I was gonna run my Torchbearer character creation, my second Torchbearer character creation. For my second group, my Saturday group, and then I realized I forgot that we were at 8 o'clock. So, so I was like, oh shit, I'll just go live. Michael, what's up? Nyander, good to see you. John, hello. Couple of us. Yeah, I'm a couple of us. We'll hang out here. Now I bored. And you certainly are now that you're here. All right. Yeah, well, again, I literally have to drop off in an hour because I'm going to be running this game session, so character creation. So, yeah. What's up, GeoRock? Voy, nice to see you. You've totally fallen off The Sims, but you haven't changed the name yet. That's totally fine. I ran another session of B2. That's Keep on the Borderlands for those people. For my BX game, they befriended the Minotaur and killed the priest from the keep that totally turned heel on them. God, I love that adventure. That adventure is so good. And Ryan from our Patreon, who is going to be he's one of the players in my Sunday game for Torchbearer. He was describing how he ran through it, and he was like, one of the things I love about it is every time everybody tells a story about this game, about B2, he's like, it's crazy how everybody has different stories. It's the same adventure, right? But you get different stories every time. And that's like, so for me, that is the gold standard. One of the things I don't like is that with modern day adventures, so many of the games play out exactly the same in everybody's campaign. And I absolutely think that is a shame. I like the idea, actually, of pre-made adventures. I think that the art of adventure making is very, very critical, very key. But I love that you can take this area and generate different stories with it each time. And I think that is for me the pinnacle of great design. That is exactly the goal, to kill some hours here. Yeah, so I was hop over, yeah. So this is my this is the Roll20 engine all set up for the new characters to come in and make their characters. So should be good here. I got all the equipment ready to go that they can drag onto their characters, and go from there. So should be fun, quick, easy, efficient. And of course, these are blanks, so the other characters are all filled out. They've got all their equipment slotted up. They've got their backpacks equipped and everything like that. And also, this looks a lot better than what I saw at 2 a.m. Yeah. Let's take a look. Let's hop over to here. So yeah, so these are the. This is the other. This is the party that's already completed. So, and these characters have their backpacks and their satchels and their belt pouches, so they have a lot more inventory and stuff like that equipped as well. So it should be pretty cool. Boothby's got to fill up his packs. Look at this stuff. He's not completely filled up. Anyways, so yeah, but nice, Paul. Mark, good to see you. I mean, Lolly, it's more people than I expected for sure. What would I play in Torchbearer as a player? Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there's not that many options, right? So, I think, not to go off on like a tangent, but this is something we were talking about last night. Let me go back over to it. So let's take a look at Bob's character sheet here. Excuse me. Oh, no, that's his token. I'm still learning Roll20. It's been a long time. Okay. So this is Bob Karanlas. And he's an elf. And one of the things about this game, for those who may not remember it, is that every race, or what they call stock here, every creature has a nature rating. Okay, and your nature rating is like how much of your people, how much of your race are you? How much are you driven by your nature? And for an elf, that is singing, remembering, and hiding. And Bob is at 6 of 6. And in this game, if you go to 7, if your nature goes up to 7, if Bob were to fill in all these little check boxes here, his rating would go to 7. And when that would happen, his character would actually, retire, because his character would become so elf-like that he would leave. Essentially, he would leave the shores of Middle Earth and return to the Grey Havens. Similarly, if your nature ever gets down to 0, your character also retires because they're too burned out. They're too sort of grinded down by the life, and they become a stranger, a weirdo, a hermit. And there's this idea that is for me very analogous to the balance tracks in Avatar. Where in Avatar, the whole concept of that game in PBTA is you have these two conflicting or these two kind of opposed principles. There's my responsibility, there's my duty, and then there's freedom. These are the two things, and I'm torn between them. And like the whole point of Avatar is sort of exploring this your character's journey through the lens of this conflict between your role, your responsibility, your duty, but also your desire, your need for freedom, right? So how do we find balance, right? Now, ultimately, Avatar wants you, it states as a goal that you should look to find balance. It's, kind of the message theming of the game. But there are, it's totally acceptable, and I would even say totally fine for your character to not find balance. And in Avatar, if your character goes too far off of the track, one way or the other, they essentially also kind of retire because, that question has been answered. Because the question is, can you find balance? And if the answer is no, then we've answered that question and you have committed to that thing, right? Maybe for your character, again, the whole idea is, can you find a balance between freedom and responsibility? But maybe you can't. Maybe you realize that too many people rely on you, and maybe you realize that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, and that that there are people who depend on you, and ultimately maybe your character's journey takes you to a place of duty, right, of responsibility, and you're okay with that. The GM's okay with that. The story's okay with that. And so as you move down that path, your character kind of makes that choice and that decision, and that has certain mechanical consequences. But one of the larger consequences is that essentially your character then becomes retired, because we've kind of answered that question. But in Torchbearer, you kind of have the same thing, where on one side you have this idea of this kind of stereotypical representation of who elves are, or who dwarves are, or who humans are. And on the other side, you have the life of an adventurer, right? Someone outside of the normal realm. And your nature, going from 7 to 0, kind of represents that same walking that path of balance. And there's mechanical benefits to having a low nature. There's mechanical benefits to having a high nature. And, so for me, I always look to, beloved media tropes. And for me, there's probably no better example of this than the Lord of the Rings movies and, the books. Okay. So if we take a look at Sadok Saddlebelly here, and Sadok Saddlebelly is a halfling, right? A hobbit, essentially. And you can see that their natures are sneaking, riddling, and merrymaking, right? And if we know anything from the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I think we can all agree these were probably pretty good things for the hobbits, right? For the halflings. They're good at sneaking. They're good at being quiet, good at being unnoticed. Now, we know Bilbo's a mean riddler. Even Frodo, right, helps solve the riddle of the elven door in Moria. And then obviously merrymaking, right? The hobbits love to sing and dance and have parties and, kick back and relax. So if you think about it, now you're an adventurer, or you're a scoundrel. So your character does sort of exist outside of that space a little bit, right? But remember, if you could think about it this way, if this character had a nature score of 7, they would not be adventuring. They would be sitting at home under the hill, right? Smoking a pipe of tobacco or pipe weed, right? Enjoying the squashes and having a pint of ale at the Green Dragon Inn, right? Or they say, it comes in pints, whatever, a cup. So that's like what. So in that respect, if your character, your halfling, reached 7 nature, it means that you've sort of given up on the life of adventure. You've gone back to your roots. You've gone back to settle down and to exist. And again, there's this idea of literary comparisons. Well, what I like to think of is, and if you play Torchbearer, you will learn that one of the things that can get ground down over time is your character's nature score, right? When you're out there adventuring, when you're out there when the shit gets real, sometimes it's tough and you have to rely on your nature, and that means that your nature gets worn away and eroded. So what I like to think happens in Lord of the Rings is that by the time Frodo is done with the adventure, Frodo's nature has been reduced to 0, right? It took all that he had left to complete the adventure. And at the end of the story, Frodo really can't be with the halflings anymore. He can't be with the hobbits anymore. He is sort of forced to retire because he is outside of sort of the order of society. He is the adventure, don't stare too long into the abyss lest it stare back at you. And so Frodo has to leave, right? I mean, in game terms, he had to retire his character. His character had wounds that went too deep. He couldn't enjoy the riddling and the merrymaking like other halflings and hobbits anymore because his nature had been eroded away because of the burden of the ring, right? Whereas the other hobbits were able to sort of regain that and sort of restore that. So I think it's a really interesting, sort of comparison. And then the example the opposite example of this is if we were to take Aragorn, and Aragorn he's not technically a human. He's not a man. He's technically a Númenórean, right? He's a Dunedain, which means Westman, and he comes from a nobler stock, right? That was blessed by the Valar with, unnaturally long life and strength and vitality. So we can imagine that if this was Aragorn's character sheet, Aragorn's stock or his race would be Dunedain, right? And he comes from the line of kings. That's his lineage. And so his nature descriptors might be like, ruling or leadership or commanding or, guiding or, statecraft or something like that, right? These sort of noblesse nature of the men of Westernesse. But in the beginning of the story, unlike the hobbits, Frodo is sort of the archetypal hobbit, right? He loves the Shire. He loves being a hobbit. And so his nature starts really, really high. And as the adventure goes down, his nature gets worn down and worn down and worn down because the stuff he's doing is more and more, or I should say, less and less like a hobbit and more just like a horrible, burdensome adventure. Aragorn, on the other hand, if you think about it from our perspective, he starts the adventure at a very low nature. Remember, the nature of his lineage, the nature of his balance is, his nature is to be a king. It's to guide people. It's to lead people. It's to be in a public, face of people. But Aragorn has sort of turned his way away from all these things. He's a ranger. He lives in the woods. He mostly hangs out with elves, right? He doesn't really trust men or like men that much. He's untrusting of Boromir and the men of Gondor, and he's sort of turned away from his people. And he's embraced the life of the ranger, of the adventurer. So in the story, Aragorn starts off with a very low nature. He's more adventurer, right, than king of men. And his path through the story arc is that his nature score, he keeps finding himself called upon. Remember our example of Aragorn being from the stock of Dunedain. His nature descriptors would be like ruling, leading, right? Giving people, guidance, giving people faith, giving people belief. As the story progresses, Aragorn finds himself doing more of those things over and over and over again, and that means that his nature score is going to go up, 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 up. And eventually, Aragorn's nature score, by the end of the Lord of the Rings, has essentially reached 7, and now he is the ultimate Dunedain. He is the ultimate king of men. And he is forced to retire from adventuring because he's got to give up the life of the ranger, the life of the wilderness fighter warrior, to become, as to quote Elrond, right, when he gives him Andúril, the Flame of the West, he says, put aside the ranger, right, become the man, become the king that you were born to be. And he's basically saying, look, your nature score's at 6, you got to get it up to 7 so that you can truly embrace your destiny, give up being an adventurer and take your place and be who you're supposed to be. So you have these two people, Frodo and Aragorn, who are sort of going on opposite arcs through the story, right? Frodo starts very much as a part of his people, and he ends completely isolated with them to the point where he has to leave Middle-earth. And Aragorn starts off completely isolated from his people and ends up at the end being in the middle of them, leading them, being their great hero. So it's this kind of interesting parallel between those two characters' journeys. And I thought it was very interesting because I think Torchbearer and kind of vis-a-vis Burning Wheel do this very interestingly with this nature concept. And the way of going up and down. But it also reminds me again of the same things that you would see with Avatar. Now, obviously, Torchbearer isn't as expressly focused on that as Avatar is, but it's there. It's definitely a thing that I think can be fun to play with, for sure. Let's see here. So, what would I play in Torchbearer? I think it'd be cool to be an elf. I think it'd be very cool to be an elf. I think it'd be interesting to explore that particular race or ancestry through the lens of this balance or this nature system. I think most of us would agree that like the core, the core impetus of being an elf, is something we don't usually deal with, right? We just think elves go, +2 to dexterity. And we don't really think about it. But the idea in this game is that the elf is, is this immortal being who is fighting the urge to leave, and to be amongst his people or her people. I think that's really interesting. So I think the elf would be kind of cool. What did that hour ever do to you? I'd have to kill it again. I mean, it's just I was a little early. I thought we were going at 8 or 7, and we're going at 8. Is it 7 for all stocks, or are humans like a 4 or 5 because they fuck off easily? It is 7 for all stocks, but I'm trying to remember. There's things that can happen in the game that can lower that permanent maximum from 7 to 6 to 5. I think that can happen. So if it matches out, you reach Golconda. If it hits 0, you succumb to the beast. Yeah, kind of. Did I ever talk about a symmetrical TTRPG like Trad D20 versus asymmetrical like PBTA and Forged in the Dark? Not all PBTA games are asymmetrical. Some are. God knows Magpie games are very asymmetrical. I don't know that I have MCRP. I don't know. I'd have to think about how I feel about that. But I mean, obviously I've played both, and I think they both have pros and cons. But I don't think I've specifically talked about that. What's up, Solana? Hello. I look like a man who has not slept in days. Well, I mean, I went to bed at like 6 or something, or like 5. And then I woke up at like noon today. So, I got like 6 or 7 hours of sleep. And that was after I got like a 4-hour nap last night. So, oh no, that wasn't last night. No, never mind. That was Thursday night. Never mind. I actually played a bunch of Magic last night, Friday. I played 2 drafts of the Innistrad Remastered in paper. Won both. That was pretty cool. What's up, Boothby? Philip, what's up? I've been running Lancer RPG, which has turned into no roleplay, only mech combat, which is okay. Hey, if everybody's digging it, yeah, absolutely. I've been watching your old videos to find a fantasy RPG to convert my wife off of D&D. It can be tough. It can be very tough. I mean, it depends on what she likes about D&D and why she wants to keep it. There's definitely options out there. I don't know. Does she want to be more complex? Does she want something less complex? So that's a great question. What's up, Open World? Welcome. Will, good to see you. Something else I was thinking about while we're sitting here is I've got friends who play Magic at lunch, and they will call me away from my desk to answer judge calls. Lol. I mean, listen. Once a judge, always a judge. Okay, once a judge, always a judge. We play up at the shop, and I don't think there's anybody up there that's even remotely a judge anymore. But we'll sometimes still be like, judge. When like somebody does something, like they miss a trigger or something, or do something, just obviously messing around. But Innistrad Remastered was awesome. I had my second deck was this black-red. I wanted to start off being like a blue-black control deck with a bunch of Think Twices and counter magic, but I got cut off of blue hardcore, and so I ended up going into black-red vampires with a pretty strong madness sub-theme, and I got like a bunch of madness vampires, and I got a bunch of madness, the alchemist's, whatever, it's alchemist's rage or something like that. It's like a 4 damage fire spell for madness 2. And I got like 2 faithless lootings and a bunch of blood tokens. I got 2 of the bloodthirst harvesters, whatever, the 3/2. It was a great deck. It was awesome. And it played well. So it was so good. It's a very limited set. The print run, I guess, was pretty small. It's only on Moto and paper. So I actually ended up buying a box because, Aether Drift comes out in a couple weeks. So I don't know if we're going to be able to even draft this game. So I kind of wanted to buy a box just to put it away in my closet so that, maybe a couple months from now or whatever, we can crack the box and at least do a draft, or maybe 2. I don't know, 36 packs. So if we do a 6-man, that's 18 and 18. Yeah. So we can do 2 drafts off of it, which would be perfect. So yeah, there you go. 2 6-mans out of one box, which is not bad. The price of a Magic the Gathering box, it destroyed. It's been a long time since I bought. Because even when I was playing Magic very actively, I really didn't buy packs. I certainly didn't buy boxes. When I needed cards for Standard, which is to say every card, I would go to my local game store. I would, in my game, he knew this. So before the set would come up, he'd get his early initial stuff. He'd crack open a couple cases just to fill his binders for people to sell singles. But he would get 4x of each card in Standard from the new set, and then he would price it out and sell it to me, and he'd give it to me in like a 1,000 count box, and it had 4x of every rare, every mythic, every uncommon, every whatever, a bunch of tokens. And usually it was between $500 to $1,000, and I would buy that. So it's been a long time since I bought a Magic box, but I was like, I used to pay like friends and family prices of like $85-$90 a box. I paid like $190 for this box of Innistrad Remastered, and I guess the MSRP on it is like $240 or something, which is just insane for cardboard. I mean, I get it. Prices have gone up, but that was crazy. Anyways, that was my Magic stuff. Yeah, my sleep schedule's been horrible. Earth Dawn? Hell yeah. Earth Dawn's great. Earth Dawn is it's right out. It's right there. It's right out of the sight of the camera. Yeah, I thought I'm running a game for patrons, and I thought it started at 7. And so I was sitting down, I had my camera on and my head, thing to run a game for people on Zoom or whatever on Discord. And I was like, oh shit, it's at 8. So that's listen, if you mess up, he'll never play again, and it'll all be your fault. Yeah, Rakdos is great. I like Black Red. I like Boros too. Like I don't know. I like all the decks in Magic. Traditionally I'm not a control player, but that's a tough beat. That's a tough beat. Like a couple years ago, we used to get together and do these drafts. Somebody had a box of Fallen Empires, and we played it as a draft, and it was like one of the worst draft experiences of our entire lives. At Roll for Combat is Steven. Open world. Mind blown. Playing Magic right now. It's going good so far. It's going very good. But oh, you're right. So what was I going to do? I was going to do this. So I was thinking about this as I was, getting ready to the other day, and I was thinking about Photoshop. Let me just. Where the heck is this thing? There it is. Okay. Okay. So I was thinking about dungeons, and I realized something that I don't know if we've ever actually really talked about this on the stream before, but so like one thing that I think is kind of interesting is this idea that I think a lot of people when they think about TTR, when they think about designing dungeons, this is kind of crazily tied to tied to Magic, is they think about we talk about this all the time with Magic, or we talk about this with Magic all the time, but like we talk about all the time with Magic, this idea of right, we talk about top down, right, versus bottom up, right? And so design. So like this is this idea that like in Magic the Gathering or in anything, top down design is like, okay, I want to do a horror themed game, or I want to do a horror themed set. So, okay, we got to put in zombies, and we got to put in, vampires, and we got to put in whatever. Okay. We want to do an Egyptian theme set, right? So, okay, we got to put in mummies, and we got to put in some sort of big river, some holy river, maybe some pyramids. So the idea is that the theme guides your game design. Bottom-up game design starts more from a mechanical consideration. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had a set that really dealt with lands and interesting things that you could do with lands? We'll figure out the flavor, earlier or later. Sorry, we'll figure out the style, what we're going to do with it later. Let's just design solid mechanics right first. So I think when a lot of people make dungeons, I think they start almost always top down. Am I writing with a stylus or mouse? How do you not, Lollipop, how do you not know that? Yes. I am using a Wacom Intuos Pro Medium. So Wacom Intuos Pro Medium with the standard pen and tip. Actually, I might be using the hard tip. So a lot of people, I think, start with this idea of dungeon design from a top-down design. And that's to say that they come in and they go, okay, I want to make a dungeon. I want it to be, it's like, it's got Fae, and there's going to be this Fae theme, and I need to put it right. Like, they're thinking about it from a perspective of thematic elements, of style, of like, what is this dungeon about? And, what is it for? And I actually typically design my dungeons backwards. I opposite from that. I design my dungeons. I start with a bottom-up approach, okay? Which is to say, I kind of design my dungeons mechanically, and then I fill in the theme or whatever I'm going to do with it later. So, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? Okay, so, and again, I only have 20, 30 minutes. So it means like if I was designing a dungeon, and maybe I can just show you as I go through this, like I tend to use like a flowchart type system. And back in the day, this used to be like literally just the way that I would, kind of initially sketch out the dungeon. And then of course I would come in and, put in, all the little corridors and doors and little rooms and all that stuff, right? Nowadays, I really don't do that as much because nowadays I kind of prefer to just use like point crawl or node crawling or whatever, point crawl type systems to make it just easier because I'm not as concerned about like the intimate, mapping components of the game. So let's say that I want to create a dungeon. Well, the first thing I want to do is I actually want to create an interesting board, right? A dungeon is a play space. A dungeon is, it's like an amusement park. It's like a casino, right? You want to think about the flow. You want to think about the gameplay elements of the actual topographical layout. This is how you make exploration fun, is you make it a place that is interesting to explore. And you do that by starting off, before you start thinking about the theme or what Fae creatures you're going to put into your Fae themed dungeon or what, undead and how, no, you just design it like it's a simple playground or simple, board game, you're laying out the spaces on a board game. So, and from that perspective, right, this is where we talk about like this idea of, right, of like Jacquet's, right, Janelle Jacquet's, and her process to designing dungeons, which is, basically avoid linearity, right, have multiple places and multiple ways to get to multiple locations. Don't have a clear, path that the players, sort of have to go down, right? So avoid linear dungeon design, right? That's kind of the core premise of Janelle Jacquet's. Another one, which I've sort of taken to heart, I did a stream on this, which is I don't remember their name. I think it's like Sursa Victory or something. They took this premise from some video games, and they talk about cycles and cyclical game design. And the idea of cyclical game design is like, don't make your play space a one pass through. All right, like this is not the dungeon. I'm just like really quickly designing this, like super cheap. Like, let's say, okay, so a linear dungeon would be, okay, like this is my usual symbol for an entrance, right? It's this kind of V shape or whatever. So, you come in and there's a room here, and then there's a room here, and then there's a room here. And you're like, well, and this is the big bad boss. And you're like, well, okay, no, but there's a room here. And, oh, look, there's a room here. And a lot of people say, look at my 5-room dungeon. I guess this is 6-room dungeon. Look at my 5-room dungeon. Isn't this swell? And look, the players, they have a choice. They can, obviously they have to go to room 1, and they have to go to room 2, and, they have to go to room 4, and obviously they have to go to room 6, or 7. I guess it's a 7-room dungeon. I can't count. But they could go to room 3. They could go to room 5. These are totally optional, right? Like they didn't have to come. They didn't have to come here. But this is a linear dungeon, right? This sort of fails the, Jacquesing principle, because at the end of the day, the players have to go through this line of the dungeon when they go through your dungeon, right? So that fails that respect. So then, enterprising people say, okay, I want to create a better dungeon. So let's do that. And so what they'll do is they'll say, okay, they'll go... All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Off the entrance, it's going to go up to here, okay? And then it's going to go over here, and but then this can go here, and then this can go here, here, here. Okay. Now, to be clear, I think this is better, right? Because now, if we look at our dungeon, right, we could go this way through the dungeon, right? We could go this way through the dungeon, or we could go this way through the dungeon. All 3 of these core paths, and this room is obviously optional as well. But you could go 1, 2, 3 different ways, and they're all valid, and they all should theoretically have different challenges and different spices. This, I think, in my opinion, properly fulfills the Jacques terminology. Where does this run into a problem? Well, the problem is if your adventure begins here, okay, and ends here, then the players never get to explore this space in a meaningful way. And one of the ideas I like is this idea of including cycles and circles. And basically what it comes down to is what I really want the path through this dungeon to look like is the players come in and they go up here, and then they have to stop. They can't go forward. So they go back over to here, and they realize they're like, oh, we should go here, but we can't. So we have to backtrack to the beginning, come this way, come down to here, get this MacGuffin, take that back over this way, all the way over here, up here, get this, open that, go back this way, come through this way, and then finally go here. Now, obviously, I'm not saying like they have to hit every room. But what I'm saying is you want this to be an environment that they are moving through and back. Right? You want them to be backtracking. You want them to be sort of cycling through your dungeon space multiple times. Number one, it breeds a certain amount of familiarity. It'll let people kind of get that mastery of the location of the space. But secondly, it gives you more bang for your buck, right? Like you can get more use out of certain spaces, and you can get more playtime, and it gives you a better chance for the characters to run into your encounters, which you've prepared. But it also makes the adventure feel like a place that needs exploration, not just find the path of least resistance to get, to kind of speed run the dungeon. And there may be sort of an optimal place, or an optimal way of producing this thing. But, I think that's the idea. is you want to create these sort of, and again, some video games, do this really well. I grew up playing Legend of Zelda, right? Like Legend of Zelda is great for this, right? You go through the dungeon, you get to the place, and it's got the door. But you can't go through that door yet, right? You got to go back. Now you've got the thing, the key, you got the master lock or whatever, the master key. So now you got to go back almost to the beginning of the dungeon to where that room was. Now you can access that room and you can go that way, right? And so this is like basic video gaming 101. And don't think that this, just because it's a video game, don't think that this doesn't matter. I mean, yes, if your RPG is just about expressing your character's innermost thoughts, hopes, and desires, then none of this shit matters. But if you're playing D&D and you actually care about Dungeons and Dragons and the mechanics that the game is espousing to be about, I think this stuff matters. Derek says, Derek usually has some good thoughts on this. I like figuring out the structure of my dungeon, then working backwards from that. Where are my pinch points? Where are my required paths? That's. I think working backwards is also fine. I like to start at the entrance, but I think you could just as easily start at the end and go backwards from there. Janelle Jaquays always has multiple entrances. It's definitely something I do. Maybe, a certain size, it depends on how he says. Like 7 rooms would be pushing it, but if we start getting up to like, when I say 7 rooms, I mean like 7 areas. But when you start getting to like 10 or 12, I definitely think that having multiple points of ingress and egress, I think, are cool. And sometimes it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? It can be this path is only useful for ingress and not for egress, right? So like let me give an example. Like maybe we'll steal this idea. So like a great example of this was like a great example of this would be, let's say that we'll use a different color here. We'll use hot pink. Let's say that your characters. So this is like a profile, right? So this is a side view of the room that they're entering in, right? So we're looking sideways. Okay. So the characters are relatively deep in the dungeon, and by the way, all of this presumes that this is something that the characters are potentially going to have to deal with in multiple forays. Right, to a certain extent, like having multiple entrances to your dungeon doesn't matter if the players are only going to go there once and never come back, right? So if they can basically one-shot your dungeon, this doesn't matter. But let's say the group has, maybe we have a much more involved dungeon or something like that, and we're further in. So over here on our profile here, the characters are coming through a tunnel, right? Side passageway. Remember, this is the side view. Okay. And then they enter into a big cave. And on the other side of the cave, they see that there's a continuing path that leads deeper into the dungeon. And what they see is that this dungeon has a really high cavernous ceiling. But in the center of the ceiling, okay, there is some sort of sinkhole or some sort of opening, and they can actually see maybe some sunlight zipping down from it. Now this is too far. Now maybe their characters can fly, in which case, great, this becomes a point that they could leave the dungeon immediately. But right now, where they are in the dungeon, there's no way that they'll be able to throw a rope up there. And, it's D&D, never say never. But for the most part, this is one of those okay, we can't use this to get out right now. Okay. But later, when we leave the dungeon, we can remember that this was here and we can go try to find it. And then we can get to the top and we can we'll bring extra ropes and we'll lower, 150 feet of rope down, and we'll be able to re-enter the dungeon deeper in, right? Voiding some of the earlier stuff that we had to deal with. And not only that, we'll potentially be able to climb our way out of it and avoid all that stuff that we had to deal with. And that just feels like, again, the players are changing the experience. And whenever the players can have an impact on their environment, that feels like real power. That feels like real, most of the time when we think about the players having an impact on the environment, it's usually the monsters are dead. And that feels pretty good, right? Like there was this challenge, you overcame it, they're dead, you're not. But being able to interact with the environment like that is how you make dungeons fun. It's how you make exploration fun. So let's see here. It's none of them. It was I started at 7:00. I was going to play Torchbearer, and I realized that my session time is until 8. So I was like, okay, I got an hour to kill. I got 15 minutes now to kill. So, right, but I mean, at a certain point, everything ruins everything. But you know, I mean, I will admit that being able to fly does can. Here's the problem: level 1 flight is only a problem if you are playing an exploration-based dungeon game where verticality is a component. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that like 99% of the RPGs that are happening right now today, don't fall into that description. So it doesn't really matter, When they repeat the cycle, what do you do for room 1? Do you repeat encounters? Oh no, absolutely not. Hey, Jace, what's up? All right, and Sunday heading out. We'll catch the VOD. All right. Well, thanks, AGM. Not much of a stream. We're just kind of hanging out here for a little bit, but thank you for the super chat. That was totally unnecessary. Been totally awesome. Thank you. Enjoy the VOD. But we don't necessarily repeat the encounter mark. It comes back to what did the heroes accomplish in that room, and how did they accomplish it, and to a certain extent, this gets back to some of the design elements, Mark, that we've talked about quite a bit. I don't want to get off on like a tangent about like old school mechanics and Torchbearer and all this other stuff, but like, back in the day, it was pretty rare for players to like kill all the monsters. Like maybe when you entered room 1, there was a bunch of goblins, okay, and you fought, 24 goblins, and you killed 3 or 4 of them, and then the rest of them, were like, and they ran away into the dungeon, and they ran this way. So you guys go, okay, we're going to go this way, and we're going to go this way, we're going to go back, and then we're going to come over here, and then we're going to come back here. And now when they come back to room 1, maybe if it's been an hour or two, maybe the goblins are back, and maybe they attack, maybe they don't. On the other hand, if the players, wipe the goblins out to a man, to a woman, then when they come back, maybe there's nothing, So it kind of depends on, how you want to structure it. I wouldn't necessarily say just like literally run the encounter back, Sursa Victory is a designer. Yes, I'm talking about their work on cyclical dungeon design, Andrew, and how it was a very, obviously I grew up playing, Legend of Zelda and Metroid and Castlevania. But they did a really great job of kind of putting that into a kind of a clear, understandable process. So before I go, let's see if we can build a fun little dungeon, or something. So, kind of talking about like my fundamental principles to a certain extent. Okay, so I have a couple of my own rules, which I'll talk about when I get to there. So this is our entrance, right? And the entrance is going to go into some sort of room. And again, this is a region, a room. It's a point crawl. It's a node crawl, right? Now, one of the things I also want to do before I go in here is I kind of want to think approximately, how many of these encounter spaces, room spaces, do I want to have? Because how many sessions do I want the players to have to muck around here, right? Is this a one shot, or, am I expecting to get, 2 to 3 sessions out of it? Do I want to get 3 to 5 sessions about that? And this is something that it depends on your players. It depends on your group. It depends on what they like. It depends on the system, right? Some games can run games very fast. Or run these type of encounters and these type of things very fast. Other ones, don't. But for our purposes, generally speaking, I would say that anything between, 5 to 7 is probably 1 to 2, depending on how fast and how slow your players are in the systems. And then like 8 to 12 is definitely good for like 2 to 3. And then, 13... like 13 to 18 is bless me, 4 to 5, and going up from there. I'll say sorry. Okay, so I kind of keep that in mind. So And again, it's a ballpark. Sometimes you gotta. So let's just say we're aiming for 8 to 12 regions or zones. Now, again, I'm not thinking theme, right? I'm not thinking about what I'm going to put in my dungeon yet. I'm basically designing a template for my dungeon. Now, one of my rules of thumb is, I want players to make choices, right? So they've just come in from the entrance. So that doesn't really count as a choice. So obviously I want there to be at least 2, right, exits from this room. Now we could do 3, but as a because technically this is a 3-room dungeon, so really it would be 4. But whatever you want to say it. I prefer 2, but I will use 3. I use 3 sparingly. If for no other reason, then it just makes the choice that much harder, right? I like to just A and B, right? Very simple, very easy. You can include a third, you can include a C option, but I use those again very sparingly. In fact, most of the time when I have sort of a room, which essentially looks like, right, like essentially looks like this, I very rarely consider these rooms. I think of these more as like hub locations that sort of connect different regions of the dungeon into sort of a town square, if you will, of the dungeon area. I don't really think of them in that same way of being like a room. Anyways, so I'm a big fan of just splitting it into 2. So we'll have a room here. Oh, that's not it. Okay. We'll have a room here, and we'll have a room here. Okay, or a region or a room here. Now, again, I'm just kind of feeling it out and just kind of drawing things. I want to create cycles, and I want to create nonlinearity. Now, another thing which I try to avoid is what I call pass-through chambers. So let me see if I can design one here. So, okay, let's say we go here, and we go, all right, we'll have one here, so we're branching. And then we'll go here, 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 here. Okay, so we're going to say that this is our, I'm just going to use this red here, right? So this is our, now destination is, right? Destination's a loosey-goosey word, right? Because, we're not like, it's not part of our major plot, right? It's not like the players have to go here, but I mean, maybe they do. I mean, you know what I mean? But like for me in a classic dungeon, right? This is where the big treasure is, right? Like this is where, the Lich's crypt is. This is where whatever the MacGuffin is, right? There's something to be said here. Now, I'm putting it at the end, right? Now this is where, again, now we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9. So this meets my criteria. However, there's a couple of problems I have. And going to our sort of Jaquasian process, we could see that the players could take, they could take this route to get there. They could take this route to get there, or they could take this route to get here. So there's 3 totally different, totally distinct, totally fine ways of getting from the entrance to our sort of final goal chamber. Okay, but there's a couple of problems that I have with this personally. Okay, the first is, I'm just trying to find colors that we can use here. We'll use yellow. I try to avoid, as much as I can, okay, I try to avoid rooms like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. Okay, so these are what I call pass-through rooms, right? You enter the room, and then you have an encounter, I guess, and then you leave the other side of the room, right? So there's no choices here. There's no player agency in these rooms. So to me, these are just a series of encounters, in a hallway. This is a modern MMO dungeon. I try to avoid these kind of chambers in my room. or in my dungeon, because I don't think they're interesting. And I think that, you can use them on occasion, like if you really want to create sort of a, like a gauntlet or a bottleneck. But by and large, I try to avoid them because I don't think that they're interesting. Now, there's a couple ways you could solve this. One is you could just erase the room and just, connect the dungeon or connect that thing back to the, connect these two things together. However, one of the things I do like to create in the dungeon, I think these are important, is the opposite of a choice, which is a dead end. But I don't want it to be a dead end in that it dead ends into nothing. It dead ends into some interesting, unique thing that isn't tied to what I would call the main linear progression of the dungeon. So remember we talked about our green lines of the ways that you could go through this dungeon. So when we look at these lines, okay, so what I can do is I can say, let's put a room over here, and let's put a dead end room over here, and let's put a dead end room over here, and let's put a dead end room right there. So now we've gotten rid of all of the simple decisions, right? Where now these rooms, this now is a really interesting choice, because whether you know it or you don't know it, right? You could go through the dungeon this way and get to that's the fastest path, if you will. But like, what about this room, right? And what about this room? This is an optional room. It's like a bonus room. They don't have to go through there, to get to the big main treasure, but it's an interesting choice. And this is a great place to give players, you could put challenges into these areas, right? Here, 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 and here, that are maybe more difficult or, require more, I don't know, player skill or something, because, they're not as, it's not as required is how I would describe it, right? You don't want to, you don't need to do that. All right, so now we have what I consider to be a very Jacques dungeon, because not only are there multiple different routes the party could go through to get to our red entrance or red key zone, but there are no rooms that are just simple pass-throughs. They all have very interesting choices and decisions. We have this kind of interesting texture laid out. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left. So how do we make it so that the party has to go through this dungeon not just once, but actually go through and build cycles? Well, according to cyclical dungeon design principles, one of the easiest ways that you can do this is with locks. Now, locks is an abstract term. It could literally mean a lock, but it could also mean any variety of things. Imagine there's a chasm that's too wide to jump across, and this is before the players have access to flying magic or anything like that. That is essentially a lock, right? So what's the key to that lock? The party finds a wind temple in the dungeon that if they can bless it, or they can defeat the monster that's corrupting it, right? They gain the ability to float or hover or fly or something like that for half an hour or something, right? That's like gaining the lock to that key. So the key is metaphorical. Now, again, we're not designing any actual, substances to these things. We're just thinking about this strictly from a play design standpoint. So I'm going to put some locks. I'm going to put a lock in my dungeon. And why not? Okay. I'm going to put it right here because, I'm a jerk. And I want my players to have to do their work. Okay. Now, okay. So now what happens? The party goes through the dungeon, right? They get to this room. And what do they discover? Oh, crap. Oh, crap. We can't go that way, right? They came in here, they found their way through here, they went up here, they're like, look at me, I'm so clever, and oh no, there's a lock of some type, remember? It doesn't have to literally be a lock and key. I need to find these keys. So now I have to go back into the dungeon. I've got to do some more exploration. I got to maybe pay attention to information, lore, hints, clues, rumors, right, that will guide me to these critical locations. Now I have to put these keys somewhere. So what's a great place to put these keys? Well, let's put them off the beaten path, right? Because the party doesn't have to go through these, but now I want to encourage them to explore this space. So let's put a key down here. Let's make this a 2 key. So we got a key here, and we have a key here. So now you can easily imagine that the path that a party member or a party might take through this dungeon could be like they come in, they come up over here, they go up over here, they come down here. Oh no, there's a key. All right, let's go back here, check that out. No, okay, there wasn't there, here. Oh, we found it, great, cool. Come back over here, here, get the key, cool. We got both keys, boom, and we're out. Now, sure, they never came over here. But, you could see how they backtracked through the dungeon and they crossed over their paths multiple times. They had to use the knowledge and the education that they had gained through adventuring in this location in order to do that. But also, too, remember, this is sort of our primary goal, right? This red area. Well, we can put in, a secondary goal. All right. We can put in a, especially when you're not just doing a linear adventure, we could put in a pretty cool, we could put a, maybe this is the first prize, right? This is first prize. Maybe this is second prize. Maybe this is another treasure or an alternate treasure. Maybe it's a secondary goal. And what we can do with this is we can put a lock here. Now, assuming the party, quote unquote, theoretically, only this is, when you're playing Final Fantasy, right? The red, okay, the red is, the boss monster that you have to beat in order to progress the game, right? Or to beat the game. The blue is like going to fight Ultima Weapon or going to go get the special Ragnarok sword or Excalibur sword, right? You don't have to do it, but if you want to do it, it's there. And now we have our pink lock. Let's put our pink key all the way down over here. So now we have this space where the group is going to potentially encounter a variety of keys and locks, and these are always great because they beg the question, right? What I mean by that is, I'll say my layer styles over here. What I mean by that is if our group comes in, and the first thing they do is they take, they come in from their entrance, they take a hard right, and then they find this key. Well, now they're looking for the door. Right? Now they want to explore. I found a key. I want to find what it's for. Right? I want to, now you've given them the motivation to use this key. Similarly, if my group comes through and, they go this way, they go, oh man, I found the lock. I want to find the key, and now they're going to look, oh, shit, another key. Well, this is what we're really looking for, but what about the pink one? Well, I kind of want to find both. Do we have time for both? Do we have resources for both? So, it's one of those things where this is going to lead to, the characters exploring their space, in a very nonlinear fashion with texture and changes happening as they move through it. One last thing. I got 3 minutes. You can also include things that are going to change the dungeon dynamic structurally as they move through it. And one of the ways I love to do this, in the old days, we called these one-way doors. And oh, we're getting some lag there. So in the old days, you had this idea of doors or barriers that the party would pass through, but they could only pass through one way. And this could be literal, it could literally be when the party goes through this passageway, a door, a wall, or something slams behind them. And now getting out that way isn't an option. So it could be literally, but again, remember, just like the locks can be abstract, this thing here could also be abstract, right? And the idea of it being a barrier doesn't necessarily mean it has to be an impenetrable barrier. It doesn't have to be an unconquerable barrier, right? Imagine if the group is traveling down this passageway and there's a big trap, and they all fall and they fall down, and now they're at the bottom of the pit trap, but the corridor continues into the rest of the dungeon. Well, they could go back, but now they have to climb up the pit trap and come up through the thing. Or what if when they come through this area, okay, there's a powerful monster, right? Like a large number of monsters, or maybe there's a lot of monsters, a lot of zombies or something, or a really powerful monster that's like a high CR. And maybe as the party moves through this corridor, it gets released like behind them. So they could go back that way, but now they have to deal with this potentially dangerous fight. And maybe they have to have a clever way to get through it, or maybe they just beat their way through it, or maybe they don't. Maybe they go, we're not going back that way. That thing will kill us. And now they're stuck here, forced to have to not only get the treasure, find the goal, get the, save the princess, save the prince. But now they're like, we don't know how to get out. We are in this dungeon. So I think that there's a lot of interesting, cool ways that you can design a dungeon as a sort of interesting place first. And this is how I tend to design dungeons. And now what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll figure out thematically what monsters, what treasures, what, things do I want to put into this dungeon. So, yeah. That's it. That's my shortest live stream in the history of all things. I'm going to go play Torchbearer now. Saturday Crew Torchbearer 2 second edition session number 0 is starting now. So I'm going to go hang out with my patrons. We're going to go make some Torchbearer characters. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. We are recording these sessions. However, for right now, it looks like they're only going to be available to our patrons. So I don't know if they're ever going to see the YouTube channel, but for our patrons, you will be able to see these Torchbearer sessions from the 2 campaigns. So, and again, that's just because not everybody is as comfortable as I am being the face of the internet. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me on this crazy little mini stream, and look forward to talking to you soon. All right, everybody. Peace.